Chapters 16 and 17 were on the law and business associations. We started out talking about factors influencing a business manager's choice of organizational form, which are things like tax ramifications, control considerations, potential liability of the owners, and projected life of the organization. We talk about alternative forms of business organizations like sole proprietorships, general partnerships, limited partnerships, or limited liability partnerships, public corporations, subchapter S corporations, limited liability companies, um, partnerships, like general partnerships, and then just corporations. Talk about sole proprietorships and its advantages and disadvantages. Talk about creating a partnership and the revised Uniform Partnership Act. Talk about items included in partnership agreements, like the name and address of the partnership, name and address of partners, purpose of the partnership, duration, the loans, cross insurance of the partners, and duties of each partner. Talk about the relationship among partners. Duties among partners, like the fiduciary duties, include like duty of loyalty, good faith, fairness, the duty of obedience, the duty of care, which is the duty to manage the affairs of the partnership without gross negligence. Talk about the rights among partners, partnership property, transferability of interest, management of property partners, or management of properties. The partners have equal rights unless otherwise agreed on pursuant to partnership agreement. Information. Talk about situations that terminate a partnership, like with the resignation of a partner and bankruptcy. Talk about dissolution and winding up, which dissolution prevents any new business from taking place after the initiation of termination proceedings, and winding up is completing all unfinished transactions, paying off outstanding debts, and distributing assets, plus dividing remaining profits. The advantages and disadvantages of a partnership. Limited partnerships that consist of one general partner who is responsible for managing the business, and one or more limited partners who invest in the partnership but do not participate in its management. Talk about limited liability partnerships, LLPs. The comparison of factors of general partnerships and limited partnerships. Specialized form of business associations, like joint stock companies, syndicates, joint ventures, and franchising. Talk about internet franchising. Factors to consider before entering international waters, like currency fluctuations and the risk of non-performance. Factors that help determine the optimal level of global involvement, and factors to be considered while outsourcing, like types of employees and required skills, time required for employee training. And then if we move on to Chapter 17, it starts out by talking about corporations, which corporations are legal entities created by state law which raises capital via the issue of stocks to its investors. And then stock is capital that a corporation raises through the sale of shares that entitles the shareholders to certain rights of ownership. The classification of corporations is closely held, publicly held, domestic, foreign, alien, multinational or transnational. Subchapter S, professional benefit corporations, and nonprofits. The creation of a corporation. Corporations are governed by state law, and each state has a general incorporation statute that stipulates the articles of incorporation to be used. Activities for creating a corporation, could be incorporation, select the state of incorporation, secure a corporate name, and prepare articles of incorporation. Then corporate powers and piercing the corporate veil. Talk about debt financing, and notes, which are short-term loans, and bonds, which are long-term loans secured by a mortgage on corporate assets. Talk about debentures, which are unsecured long-term corporate loans. Talk about risk factors. Talk about equity financing, which is like raising operating capital through the sale of stock, equity, securities, or stock options. The revised Model Business Corporations Act requires the Articles of Incorporation to authorize one or more classes of stock that entitle their owners to unlimited voting rights and receive the net assets of the corporation upon dissolution. The primary classes of stocks are common stock, preferred stock, and stock options. And then the types of preferred stocks are cumulative preferred, participating preferred, liquidation, and convertible preferred. Next is capital structure and stock warrant. Capital structure is the percentage of each type of capital used by a corporation, and stock warrant authorizes its holder to purchase a stated number of shares of stock at a stated price for a stated period of time. Consideration, something of value in return of which stocks and warrants are issued. Talk about the corporate hierarchy, the role of shareholders, the role of the board of directors, the role of officers and managers, fiduciary obligations of directors, officers, and managers, the corporate opportunity doctrine, conflict of interest, and business judgment rule. Talk about limited liability corporations, which is a hybrid corporation partnership, which is similar to the subchapter S corporation, but with fewer restrictions. Talk about more details of the LLCs and its advantages and disadvantages. And then finally, the global dimensions of corporations, the Greek bailout 2 and 3. The threat of bankruptcy to Greece, Spain, and Portugal led to confusion as to who the debts issued by these nations. The European Central Bank joined with the International Monetary Fund to offer $1 trillion in loan guarantees to Europe's banks, which brought government bonds to prevent a debt sell-off of Greek, Spanish, and other sovereign debt.